All right, welcome everybody. Today on Dave Cooper Live, we will welcome Jamie Hillier, founding partner of Akerloft. Akerloft is a team of experts in delivering economic, environmental, and social value through modern methods of construction. We will discuss MMC advisory, the emergence of the MMC advisor in the UK, and what changes these are likely to stimulate in the UK market. Does it translate to the US market? Behavior science, why behavioral science is as important to industrializing construction as data science, the value toolkit, why the UK is advocating an outcome based approach, how it has developed a value toolkit to facilitate this, and the implications this has upon the adoption of prefabrication. Industrialized construction and ESG, how industrialized construction and particularly platform-based approaches supports ESG and the social value, the implications that conducting work offsite has on social value. So join us now as we discuss how industrialized construction plays a part in the economics, social, and sustainable aspects within the environment. So without further ado, let's bring in Jamie. Hey, Jamie, how you doing today?
Dave, hello. Nice to see you.
Yeah, well, hey, nice to see you as well. I appreciate you joining us on this fine afternoon. It's a holiday week here in the United States, so hopefully everybody out there is tuning in. Maybe you're already taking some time off, but Jamie, you're joining us all the way from across the pond in England. And as you know from our previous shows and watching, we're going to ask you specific things. But first, we're going to start off with, we want to know everything about you from the moment you were born to this very moment in time. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital, or we will call your mother. And then that would be embarrassing when we have her on the show. So you better let us know all about it, because you got a really interesting story and we're looking forward to it. Go for
Well, that's
it.
very kind. Thanks. I fear I might, certainly for a few of my early years, might fill you with a slightly bland story. But yeah, I mean, I live and was brought up in England, probably about 20 or 30 miles north of London. I've worked in the construction industry for best part of 20 years. So pretty much all of my working life has been spent in construction, and that began undertaking a construction degree. I was trained as a quantity surveyor, I guess, so looking after the numbers, paying the people, administering a contract, all that highly exciting stuff. And then joined a company called Kier back in the sort of late 90s, as it was, and was fortunate enough to start on a particularly large, prestigious project in the centre of London, and sort of my career, I guess, grew from there. So most of that began working on major projects, working through the business on a raft of different schemes. So whether that be on retail, commercial, residential, a whole host of different sectors, until I got to a position where I was director of that business, focused really in the sort of pre-construction arena. So looking at planning, design, again, agreeing contracts with and deals with clients and pricing jobs. And I think that's when my sort of focus, bias, and interest in industrialized construction sort of began, really. So and from that, it sort of grew until a couple of years ago, when I decided to take a slight diversion in my career and create a new business. So create our consultancy with a number of other individuals. So yeah, slight change, going from a sort of organisation that was a corporate multi-billion pound business to something that, you know, is a tiny fish in a very small pond. But there you go.
Well, it may be a tiny fish in a very small pond, but you're definitely planting some major seeds. And you know, this small pond that we're talking about, modern methods of construction, has a lot of room for growth, and it's growing fast. So, Jamie, what was it that said, you know, hey, we got to do something better? You know, I have all this experience, you know, and we need to use it to help others, you know, improve their practices, improve their modern methods of construction, and really understand not only the behavioral science of this, but the social impacts this has. Like, At what point did your brain just go, "Oh, I got to start a company with some other people, and we need to make this, our kind of core of what we're doing"?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think none of these things necessarily snap in overnight. It sort of grows as time and as your enthusiasm. And I think one thing I've certainly observed from all the people that you speak to, Dave, is a sort of common theme that everyone's got passion, real passion about what they do. For me, I always felt that well, sort of two things really. One, the construction industry, certainly in the UK, I think gets a real bad rap. I think it is quite negative about itself, and there's often reports and areas that it writes where it sort of self-reflects and says, we're really bad in a number of areas. And I think in some respects, the industry has to make huge improvements and can, but equally, I think when you reflect on what we do achieve, irrespective of where the sort of geography we'll live, there's some fantastic achievements. So for me, I wanted to take that passion of an industry that I think has the potential and does deliver some really fantastic projects that certainly shape all of our lives, and just try and within my own sphere of influence to make that better. I mean, through that sort of career, giving you the potted history, the jobs, ironically, that I always felt I learned the most on were those that went really badly. But I've always felt that they probably could have been fixed with just not fundamental changes or huge amounts of money, but just some real small differences. And quite often it came down to not the technologies that we were using, but very much the success of a project would be determined by the people, the leadership, the team, all those things that sound slightly cliched, but firsthand I was definitely seeing it. So for me, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I felt a real drive to start instigating those changes, and had the fantastic opportunity to work with some great teams that were able to do that. Sure. But I think I got to a point in my career where I felt actually there's a couple of new challenges out there. I'd spent best part of 20 years working for the same business, and really wanted to take that enthusiasm and passion and see if I could apply the same in the broader, bigger world as it is. So hence why we went and diverted in a slightly different direction.
Well, and you did, and it's funny. It's gonna be kind of cliche on how I say this, but it's really a noble way of looking at the industry. And noble is something that seems to run pretty high within your organization. And this is kind of funny. I don't think people know this, but right, George Akerlof, right, who the business is named after, is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and not even the most popular one. His wife is.
So his wife Janet is she's the US Treasury Secretary. So yeah, he's not, as you say, he's not even the most renowned economist in his own house. But yeah, he wrote probably I think it was best part of 50 years ago, a paper called Market for Lemons.
Yeah.
And it basically, if anyone hasn't heard of it, it sort of describes the impact of uncertainty of information, or asymmetry of information, as he calls it, what the detrimental impact it can have on a market. So the example that he applies that to is the second-hand car sales market, where when you're buying a car, unless you're a really expert mechanic, you're never quite too sure about the quality of what you're seeking to buy, and therefore, I guess when you present an offer and try and purchase it, you sort of factor that into your thinking. You factor it into the price you offer, and as a consequence, anyone who's got a really good car, a peach, as it were, doesn't get the value they deserve, so they exit the market, and what you're left with ultimately is a market full of bad cars, the market full of lemons. And
sure.
And for me, that paper resonates because it has an awful lot of parallels with parts of the construction industry that I've seen, and I think for me, part of our mantra was to try and pull some of the knowledge we've had, certainly working sort of GC, general contracting side, across to create transparency across the value chain, and hopefully with adopting a bit of a modern approach, using some modern methods, we can support creating a better, more modern industry that actually enables a better, more modern society as well. So.
Yep, and we're going to hop right into that. But first, everyone, listen, we are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. And if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps us tremendously grow what we are doing and share all of this knowledge with you, not only here in the United States, but we have guests on from all around the world so we can collaborate and learn together. So hit that like and share button. And if you're not following Akerlof, make sure you go and follow Akerlof and follow Jamie as well. You can find Jamie on his LinkedIn profile, and I'm sure, Jamie, you could tell us where else to find you, or maybe not where we should look. Who knows? But with that said, let's hop into this now, Jamie. Akerlof, MMC advisor, right? That's our first topic here. Walk us through what this means for you and the company itself and your team members.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, the starting point is the sort of what is the definition of MMC, and I know that Dave, you had Amy Marks on the show probably six months ago. She quite rightly talked about the use of language and consistency. So within the UK, the term that is more regularly used is MMC as opposed to industrialised construction. And for us, that's a really broad term that applies to describe contemporary innovations in construction. So that includes new technologies, digital tools, techniques, includes prefabrication, and also includes effective use of efficient processes to really deliver more productive, more sustainable, but just generally better outcomes. Sure. And I guess our role, and we've sort of called ourselves, or at least adopted the title of MMC advisor, which is getting a bit of traction, is to support companies to identify what those outcomes are, and then in turn to help evaluate and determine how those modern methods can be applied to realise those. So very much considered it through the lens of industrialised construction, and MMC being the enabler, not an ends in itself.
Sure.
And I think the MMC advisor role has grown some momentum certainly over the last 6 months, because RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, so the sort of UK equivalent of the AIA, have released an overlay where they've gone through their 8 stages of their plan of work and identified what are the sort of key tasks that need to be done to industrialise construction. And one of their recommendations was to include within the project team an MMC advisor. Now, that wasn't intended exclusively to be a new team member like ours, albeit for obvious reasons we welcome it, but it was more about creating clear designation within the team with someone that has the appropriate skills to inform the selection of manufacturing and assembly methodology, and to create that challenge that makes sure the project team at a really early stage consider industrialised construction as part of how they're seeking to deliver, rather than sometimes it being either an afterthought or no thought at all. So yeah, we've sort of, I guess, embraced that recommendation and tried to be the one of many, I guess, organisations that are fulfilling that role. So.
Well, and words are important, right? Especially when we're looking at a global conversation, for sure. And I'd be curious, and I'm just going to put it out there to those of you that are watching. Is MMC the right word moving forward globally? I personally think it is. I think industrialized construction has its place as well. But it'd be interesting to kind of take a poll while we're having this conversation. We've had this topic, when Amy was on and others, but it'd be interesting to see what people think. What should we call our industry? Is it industrialized construction? Is it modern methods of construction? So I think definitely, using modern methods of construction is pretty clear to me on what that means versus industrialized construction.
Yeah, I mean, be interesting to see what comes through the poll. For me, I'm and I may well have fallen foul of this myself, but I'm as much interested around consistency of terminology, and I'm particularly mindful where you've got key stakeholders, so certainly developers, investors, trying to understand what does this all mean, and when we're all using different language and different acronyms and terminology, it makes it really hard for them to not only engage with it, but then to actually put their money behind it as well. So for me, if we can rationalize it, then and get a bit more consistent, then great.
Love it. All right, let's say hi to a couple people here real quick, and then we're going to get on to our next topic here. We got Andrew Seeley, G-Pods America. Hey, great to have international on the show. Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. He was going for, I have to follow up. He had pros on, as always, Team Cooper. Appreciate you, Andrew. Hey, here's somebody from your neck of the woods over there. Good evening, Dave and Jen from across the pond, Andrew Wilkinson. I don't know if you know Andrew Wilkinson, but
I'm aware of Andrew, yeah.
Yep, he's over on your side of the world. Hey, look, we got the bigwigs joining us here from the NAHB. Listening to Jamie feels like I never left the UK.
There you go. I don't know whether I've just depressed him. Is that why he's written that? But who knows?
Yeah. Well, we got some other stuff for you insomniacs out there that we'll show you a little bit later, as Jamie would say as well. And stay tuned, because we're going to show you where you can get all the resources to a bunch of information, to include the Lemon Report that Jamie was talking about a few moments ago. Hey, what's happening, Joe Butler? Good morning, Team Cooper. Love the topic. Yeah, it's going to be a big topic. Joe's tasked with, building out a bunch of manufacturing and doing some amazing things right now, so I'm sure he's listening intently. And then we have a user here. I'm not sure who this is. I'll have to look it up. MMC is the best one, provides many opportunities for consideration of approaches, regardless of project scale, scope, and team knowledge. Great session, Dave. I appreciate that. I'm going to look and see who that is. That is Mark Costenson. Hey, Mark, how are you today? Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate that. Anybody else out there? What is the best name for modern methods of construction? Industrialized construction. Let us know as we go through. We're going to come back to it later. All right, we got one more up here. Chris Nicely says, great topic. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. All right, we got a lot to cover. Now, this is the one that we have not really spoke too much about on this show. In fact, we got several. But this one has me very, very interested. The behavioral science of this. Why are we looking at the behavior science of MMC and industrialized construction, and what the impacts are?
For me, Dave, I think behavioral science is hugely important. I guess just so everyone's on the same page as us, I sort of define behavioral science as how people think, how they feel, how they act. So it's a really, again, similar to MMC, it's a really broad umbrella term. It pulls in a whole different realm of broad range of psychology, whether that's social, cognitive, or organizational psychology, behavioral economics. But in effect, it investigates how we feel and how that influences how we act. And for me, how we actually make decisions and behave rather than how we think we decide and behave is really, really important for business. And it was something that sort of struck upon me as part of that journey I described earlier, probably 5 or 6 years ago, where I was in a forum and we were discussing, as is often the case, around what are the barriers to MMC and why don't people engage and adopt more prefabrication. And one of the things I observed was that there was a whole host of really strong rational arguments for why industrialized construction and prefabrication was a really positive thing. But actually, no one had really thought beyond the rational consideration and taken on board some of the irrational reasons why people push back and why people aren't necessarily interested. And for me, looking at that irrational side is hugely important. Sort of copying someone a guy called Rory Sutherland, who is a sort of expert in this area. He said to only look at the sort of rational way of thinking is like playing golf with only one golf club. So for me, quite a lot of the reasons why the industry doesn't change, why the industry doesn't adopt technology, is not because there isn't a clear cost benefit analysis that is rational. It's because of irrational factors like habit, like this principle of satisficing, that we only quite often pick satisfactory solutions rather than the utopian optimal one. We regularly prefer not the best solution. We quite often pick what is the least worst, and all of those sorts of factors I think are hugely important. So it's not really a plug, because it's probably about 5 or 6 years old now, but I wrote a book called The Choice Factory, which was very much focused around looking at those principles of irrationality, and rather than just identifying them, then trying to find ways in which how could we offset them, how could we address them and get around that. And quite a lot of it was to do with habit. I think it's 40% of our things we do and decisions we make on a daily basis are born of habit. So trying to break people out of that status quo and shift them into a new position is it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, nobody likes change, right, Jamie? I mean, that's kind of the thing. I think is the bigger thing. People don't typically like change, and I think when you do have to change, the path of least resistance is what I'm hearing you say, is what people choose, versus go through the struggle, because you'll be better off for it if you make that change. It's kind of like losing weight, right? Yeah, it really sucks not eating the donuts and the brownies, right? And you got, like me, I got to watch my kids do it all the time. But hey, if I don't want to have that, pot belly old guy look, it's a struggle sometimes. It's just that mentality.
Yeah. I definitely. I mean, I think we can probably all relate to it. And the first rule that we identified when we went through this sort of this piece of research was, if you want someone to do something, then make it as easy as possible. Because if you have any level of friction, it stops people hugely. I mean, there's a particularly morbid story that I'll share that came out in the 60s, that in the UK there was a raft of suicides from people effectively putting their heads in the oven. But when they changed the gas supply, that negated that, and as a consequence, suicide rates dropped significantly, because it just suddenly got a bit harder. Now you think making something a little bit, what is literally a life-changing decision, was shifted because things got a little bit harder. So making things easy is key, and quite often in encouraging people to use prefabrication and to industrialize construction, it necessitates a whole shift in how they operate, who operates at what point they interact. It really changes the whole ecosystem, and quite often people just think this is all a bit too hard. So there is an awful lot of distance that I think collectively we all need to travel, just to make life easier for people. Otherwise, they will definitely continue as they always have.
Yeah, sure. I mean, is that something that at AcreLoft you guys actually do? Like you work through, how do you implement change? How do you get the buy-in? How do you get the cultural shift? How do you get people to believe that the pain of the change is going to be worth it? I mean, that's all a process that has to happen. Yes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I think there's a number of different frameworks that we sort of link behind to support that. I think capability, opportunity, and motivation are probably three that I'd always go to, and you can expand that by looking at things like Kotter's seven steps and various change models. But I think the first key step, Dave, is actually recognizing what you've just described, that disruption it causes, and then working through to try and address that, and doing so in a pragmatic way. And quite often, befitting my persona, we'll quite often start with what we call a pre-mortem. So we'll paint a really negative scenario that the projects that we've just instigated a change process around, we'll paint that scenario that it completely fails, and then we'll work through the reasons of why might it fail, just to get all those things, those unspoken things out on the table, because then we can start working together as a team to start crashing them out and offsetting them. But it needs that thought process of where is this going to go wrong, and tackling it in many respects straight head on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And we got a couple comments on it. Andrew and I flashed it up earlier. And understand the change and why we are adapting the change is important, and understanding the change and promoting the changes in the MMC process to provide confidence, etc. For sure. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a show if Henry Mickelberg didn't show up with some comments. Very much enjoy watching an ex-Kears quantity surveyor talking about behavioral science. So, you know what? It's you should feel really privileged, Jamie, because normally you have to go like this to read what Henry writes, because it'll take up most of the entire page. So, hey, good to see you, Henry. Hope all is well, my friend. All right, listen, if you're just joining us, hit that like and share button, please. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It means the world to us and moving everything we do forward. Let's keep moving on. Now, you guys also have a value toolkit. So how does MMC Advisor behavior science now work its way into a value toolkit?
Yeah, good question. So the value toolkit is, I'd love to take credit for it, but it's a piece of work that's been developed by an organisation in the UK called the Construction Innovation Hub, which are, or is, should I say, government funded. And effectively, it is a suite of tools and processes which are designed to support clients to make more informed value-based decisions that ideally drive better economic, social and environmental outcomes. So it's really encouraging and enabling organizations to move beyond the focus that is heavily biased towards capital cost, and actually look at a much broader holistic definition of value. And the framework that it adopts to achieve that is called a 4 capitals framework. So it looks at principles of human capital, social capital, natural capital and produced capital. So it pulls in principles of sustainability, social impact, what influence it has from a quality and diversity, as well as other factors like cost, both immediate capital and life cycle cost, as well as areas around productivity and resilience. So it's a much broader framework. And I guess for us, in answer to your question, the reason it's interesting for us is because we want, going back to that theme of MMC to be the enabler, we want to support those better outcomes and apply MMC to deliver those, but it presupposes that actually you've defined them in the first place, and that's not always the case, I would say.
Well, it's not. And I think, having a toolkit like this, and I just want to make sure I understand it properly, is that if you're working with a client, this toolkit's going to help them see the entire life cycle of a project or their manufacturing capabilities, not only from an economic standpoint, but from an environment and a social standpoint and a behavioral standpoint as well. Because one of the things that we really have a hard time doing in this industry, especially in MMC or industrialized construction, whatever we're calling it, is how does somebody from the outside looking in quantify the value of what we do, and what is that long-term value? Because you can't compare it from stick to stick or steel to steel. It's a bigger picture, and you guys have built a toolkit to help them understand it, rationalize it, and make conclusions on what's best for their organization.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the first step of the toolkit is to apply this framework to define what is value, and then support a client to be able to articulate that, so that it makes it easier for the market, whether that be sort of me wearing my old hat or suppliers, to then be able to respond to that. So that there's a really clear link, I guess, between solutions that we're able to provide and products, the outputs that enables, and then the outcomes it actually in turn delivers. And quite often that linkage just doesn't exist. We begin with a project brief, and when we get further down the line, it gets diluted, and then it deviates, and then we're a bit short of budget, and what we we might cut a few areas off to make it viable and affordable, and your original brief, your original definition of value doesn't always necessarily get communicated through as a sort of consistent thread. Right. So for me, anything you can do to support that, I think is really important, and it's an area that, in all credit to them, the UK government has supported as well. So they have really focused in on saying that recognising the influence that the built environment has, and therefore the importance of defining value and taking time around defining value at the outset and making sure it's carried through and delivered.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's a big factor right there. I mean, you have the government on board helping to drive some of the policy changes that are happening for people to look at these things. Is it perceived that that's a good thing, having the UK government push this, or is it not perceived as a good thing, or is it still kind of 50-50? Because here it would not be perceived, I don't believe, as a good thing. I think they just need to lead the way here versus.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be there's always a raft of opinions. Yeah. I think and all of us can probably sit in the camp of we'd like the government to do more. I think equally we have to be pragmatic around some of the time it takes for these initiatives to bed in. But I'd say now within the UK, certainly in the past year, there's been two documents the government has released. One was called the Construction Playbook, which effectively is a guide that tells procuring bodies how to apply sort of best value principles and how to support a better industry and a better built environment. So you have that as the first one, and more recently, and there was another document called the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Roadmap. Bit of a mouthful, but again, that provides a much clearer pathway to delivering some of these themes I'm outlining. And right. For me, I think yes, we can debate about have they created the right vision? Is there better ways of improving it? But what I'd like to see, I guess, is having created that vision, that actually it gets delivered. So.
Well, and that's it, right? That you can create all you want, but if it's never delivered, it doesn't really make a difference whatsoever.
Definitely, yeah,
for sure. All right, our next topic: industrialized construction. Now we've been kind of playing in and out of this already in this conversation. So modern methods of construction identifies, just kind of an overall view. How are you guys seeing what are you seeing as industrialized construction, and what role are you guys playing in it?
Yeah, good question. So I think if I'll start with what our role is, and we've really been involved in sort of 4 or 5 different areas. We've supported organizations develop MMC strategies, and that's been for a number of sort of large scale clients. So we developed the MMC strategy for the Ministry of Justice and their portfolio. We've done some work on in the UK what's called the new hospitals program, so a number of hospital schemes, and we've been working as well with the Construction Innovation Hub in the manner I sort of described. So we've developed strategy, we've been undertaking some research and development, and that in turn has helped us work elsewhere along the value chain, so supporting members of the supply chain with their product lifecycle development and management. And then the 2 other parts that we sort of wrap into that is around sustainability and social values, so sort of ESG principles, as well as training. So for us, our focus certainly in respect of industrialized construction has been to support people and enable people to start applying those at whatever level of maturity they're at. And I think it's fair to say that we've got a pretty broad range of clients, and they are all at really varied stages of their maturity, which again is probably just a reflection of the way the industry is. You've got some pockets of excellence, and some of your listeners, some of those that have been making comments definitely are at one end of the scale, and you've got others that are sort of diametrically opposed just because they're their heads have been down and they've been doing it in a particular way. So,
Sure.
really broad spectrum, I would say.
And I mean, ESG is, this year alone has come up more than ever. What do you think's driving? What do you think's driving that conversation and the importance of it?
Yeah, I think. I mean, the probably the right answer should be the climate emergency is driving
Yeah.
it, but I'm not sure if unnecessarily that is the case. And someone said to me the other week about following the money. I think when you've got people like Larry Fink from BlackRock standing up and making statements around a shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, then given the size of the portfolio they hold, then people start to listen. Equally, in a sort of similar vein, when you've got Moody's that are down rating carbon intensive businesses, or in the US you had Pacific Gas and Electric that sort of identified as, if not the first, one of the first climate caused bankruptcy, that has a real ripple effect and sends shockwaves between through the sort of business community. So for me, that is a real fundamental shift that is occurring. And then when you layer on top of that, I guess a real drive and shift in the sort of social, economic, and environmental landscape, whether that be linked to the pandemic, as well as events like COP. So we had this in the UK in Glasgow. We hosted the COP conference. All of these things add momentum. I think none of them, they all evolve together, and I think that's why, quite rightly, there is much more focus now, and again that starts to percolate through into what all of us do on a daily basis, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, you're right. I think we all would hope it's for the right reason, but I don't think it always starts that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound too cynical during the holiday season, Dave, but yeah.
Hey, listen, follow the money. It's been the truth in everything in life, right? I mean, it's what pays the bills, and people get that. All right, social value. Let's talk about the social value that you're educating on, and the information that you're bringing in, and how it relates to the data as well.
Yeah, I mean, social value, I think, sort of links in those principles of the ESG, and the UK. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but the UK is certainly one of the most regionally imbalanced countries in the developed world. So there are parts where the GDP per capita is 30 times larger than the sort of poorest areas, and oddly enough, those sort of levels of inequality are probably as bad as they've been for a century, to the point that there is almost a 20-year difference in health life expectancy between the UK's most prosperous regions and those that are most deprived. So there is, as part of the sort of political landscape, if nothing else, there is a real focus to, as the UK government calls it, to level up, so not to leave any regions behind, and that's hit some policy in the UK, not least the National Infrastructure Strategy, and I think really it caught our eye a couple of years ago, not only because of that sort of that movement, but particularly when you're talking about prefabrication, what you're doing is you're shifting the point of work to a different location. Now we identified pretty quickly, as I think a lot of people have, that there is a lot of prefabrication manufacturers that are lying industrial heartlands, so probably more deprived or less prosperous areas in the UK, and therefore the opportunity to invest in those areas, in theory, should stimulate economic growth. It should help develop the prosperity of that community. It should create stability of employment, all those good things. But then you start to get these real difficult tensions around the fact that you're shifting money from one locality to another. So you're in this tension between localism versus leveling up, and how do you balance that off? And I put my mind back to 15, 20 years ago when I was working on site as both a QS and then as sort of PM, and you think, I just want to deliver my job as successfully as I can. I don't want to get drawn into where should I be investing my money in all the political dimensions. So it's a really complex area. It's an area that we're trying to work to see if we can help people bring a bit of clarity. But it's not simple, that's for sure.
No, it's definitely not. And if your goal was to stay out of politics, that doesn't keep you out of politics whatsoever. That puts you right smack dab in the center of it.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I mean, with planning law, as it certainly is in the UK, there's an awful lot of the project team that unfortunately have to take on board some of these considerations. And in some respects, it's great. I mean, there's now new requirements to consider social value when you are procuring works, or certainly central government have to do that, which ethically is brilliant, but it's an awful lot for people to take on and balance on all those sort of competing priorities. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is, right? I mean, it's the paperwork of what has to happen with all of this stuff. It's almost on some of these, I would imagine, some of these points, you'd almost have to have a full-time person managing just that portion of the job. It's a new job, so to speak. Yes.
And certainly for larger scale schemes, that's exactly what happens. I mean, that's in the same way. 5 or 6 years ago, there was a growth of digital managers and information managers, and prior to that, sustainability teams grew within businesses. Now, exactly the same is occurring with social value in it, particularly when it starts to link back to investment. So investment funds are now being classified depending on their ESG credentials, which obviously includes social value. So all of those decisions are influencing the whole realm of stakeholders.
For sure. Let's talk about some of the projects and where you guys are currently working, right? So we have healthcare facilities, custodial, commercial, data centers, single family, multifamily. No? Yes.
We do some residential. Yeah, I mean, there's a raft of other consultants that really specialize in that. I know you've had Mark Farmer and his team on before. We've probably, bearing in mind we're only a couple of years old, we've probably gravitated more to those other sectors, necessarily more so than the housing and residential areas. But we do have some of that as part of our portfolio, and I think that's definitely an area that residential and commercial, where industrialized construction is really sort of just embedded and is now much more the norm. So the use of bathroom pods and standardized design and design guides and platform repeatability is becoming much more prevalent in those areas, I would say.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that. And I think the commercial sector of MMC, or industrialized construction, is embracing it much quicker than the residential side of it is. Yeah, I agree. All right, so Michael, Michael Bruce, hey Michael, not sure, but most customers identify with modular or factory built. Adding more acronyms is always problematic in discussions with stakeholders. Well, it is, and this is kind of the problem, right? How do we have a global conversation when there's all these different terminologies out there? Because we also have MMC here, which is Modular Mobilization Coalition. Yeah, I
mean, it reminds me that in the UK, the Ministry of Defence has a book of acronyms. It's over 200 pages long. You just think that's not very workable, and if we're not careful in our industry, we'll end up doing something very similar. So.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so where do we find all this information? Let's hop in here to see. Let me pull this up because I have a screen share for everybody. Everybody loves screen share, so walk us through. What do we got here?
Yeah, so part of our website includes, within the Knowledgeshare section, there's probably 2 bits to talk through. There's a load of articles that we've written over the past couple of years. And that's what you can see on the screen. So feel free to have a read. Some of it is very much MMC focused and quite
Yeah.
straightforward. Some of it is slightly random and a bit lateral. So
Yeah, this guy here can drink 40 to 50 pints
yeah,
just so he can play. What is it? Snooker? What do you call it? Snooker?
yeah, snooker. Bill
Snooker?
Werbeniuk. He's a Canadian player from the 80s. So yeah, there's a couple of random stories in there. There's another one that actually features an American guy at the bottom, Dave, called who was a bank robber.
Oh, really?
There you go. It's the but I wore the juice, MacArthur Wheeler. So
There you
yeah,
go.
have a read of that if anyone wants a slightly obscure
I love it.
obscure story.
Let me go back.
Yeah, the other piece that we do as well in the knowledge share, so we've got in the resources. I mean, we want to encourage as much knowledge share as we can. So you'll see some external reading material, which isn't written by us, but we think it's interesting work. So you've got bits there around behavioral science we talked about, and some of the other subject areas. So yeah, if any of that provides inspiration to the audience, and then great. So yeah, some
So I
content.
mean, obviously, you guys you're just full of information. You're full of data. You're full of all these industry reports. So there's so much knowledge here to be had, and that's kind of really what we're trying to do here on the show is where can people find the resources to build it better? That's really what it comes down to.
Definitely, yeah. So if anyone's interested, I mean, at the bottom of the screen, you can see our website. Just have a look. Similarly, as Dave, as you said earlier, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. I'm not on many other social media, unfortunately. I'm certainly not up as and as current as you are, Dave. But yeah, just feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be glad to chat.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even current, man. It goes fast in this world. It goes really fast. Well, listen, everybody, we appreciate you taking the time and joining us today. Jamie, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of an inside glimpse of what you guys are doing at Akerlof and all the things that you have behind the scenes. If anybody wants to reach out to Jamie, go ahead and do it directly, or just reach out to me and I'll connect you guys. And also know that Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving here in the United States, we're going to have the folks on from Operation Triage. That's right, where 100% of the proceeds go to helping wounded veterans and their families, whether it's rebuilding, remodeling, or just giving them the help that they need. So we're going to talk about some projects there because at Dave Cooper Live, we have partnered with them. And you may be surprised if I can make it happen. Some of our big partnerships are, you got Ted Nugent, Blanco Brown, Kid Rock. There's a lot of big, name singers and stars out there. Some probably liked by all, others probably not liked by all. But, hey, as long as they're doing something that's good for the people that serve for us, I think that's an amazing thing. So, Jamie, thank you so much for everything. Is there anything you want to leave us with before we depart this fine conversation?
Dave, I'd say thanks for having us, and have a good holiday, everyone.
Yeah, definitely. You as well. Thank you so much. Don't go anywhere. We'll come right back to you, Jamie, right after the outro here. Everybody else, if I don't see you Wednesday, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we will see you again on Friday with Mark Bare Naked, Willie, and also, again, tune in 1 o'clock Wednesday. You don't want to miss us. Coming to you live from San Antonio, Texas. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching. Bye now.